So hey guys, this is your favorite the fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was son of lightning god and goddess? But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Yancy Academy, a private boarding school for troubled kids in upstate New York which surprisingly consisted of a majority of students that came from well-off, rich families. Despite this, however, and as one might expect from a place filled with mental case kids, the school was also commonplace for troublemaking delinquents. So, will you be going? A random student asked his friend as they conversed within the hallways of the school. Heck yeah, it's stinkin' popular. Ah. The friend answered before suddenly perking up when he saw a certain group of 3 boys walking down the hallway. Who are they? The other student asked once he noticed his friend getting startled at the sight of the 3 boys. They are. The friend started dramatically as he gulped, the fresh crop of this Yancy Academy delinquents, the Namikaze party. He exclaimed loudly before pointing at the boy walking at the right of the group. First, we have the goat man, Grover Underwood. Grover appeared to be a scrawny kid with Caucasian skin, curly short brown hair and brown eyes. He wore a blue t-shirt with orange outlines, a dark C-Lord zip-up hooded jacket and baggy jeans. He also carried around crutches to help him walk. Goatman, seriously. Next, he exclaimed once more while ignoring his friend as he pointed towards the boy walking by the left of the group. We have the destroyer, Perseus Jackson. Perseus was a 12-year-old boy of average height with messy jet black hair with bangs falling over his sea-green eyes, and tan skin. He was dressed in black cargo pants, and a black t-shirt over which he wore a button-up navy blue short-sleeved shirt. Finally, in his right hand twirling within his fingers was his beloved black ink ballpoint pen that he affectionately called Anaklusmos. Destroyer. Isn't that just the English meaning of his name? Finally, we have the leader. He once more ignored his friend, and pointed towards the 3rd boy walking in the middle of the group. He was also a 12-year-old boy who appeared to be about a couple of inches or so shorter than Perseus with golden blonde hair that spiked at places, and cerulean blue eyes. He also had 3 whisker-like marks on each side of his face and similar tan skin. He was dressed in black jeans, a long-sleeved black t-shirt with an emblem of fire in center. Right above his heart, over which he wore an orange short-sleeved, button-up checkered shirt that was left completely open. The boy then proceeded to close his eyes with a smug little smile playing on his lips as he waited for his awesome intro. Though that smile was quick to melt away along his face, contorting into an annoyed one when the guy spoke up again. He's who was he again? His eyebrow was twitching violently at this point. Naruto Namikaze is the name, you asses. The now named Naruto Namikaze snapped at the two with a big tick mark twitching over his forehead. And didn't you just call us the Namikaze party? Backing up, the 2 random students looked at each other. Oh crap, let's run away, the 2 said to each other before running away from there. Naruto for his part just stood there taking deep breaths to calm himself as he watched the 2 idiots scurry away. Sorry Naruto, Grover said, hoping to provide some comfort. We stand out a bit too much. A new tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead before he rounded to his friends. Yeah, you do. And how the hell can you stand out more than a guy with bright yellow hair, who wears freaking orange is beyond me. Naruto exclaimed in irritation. Why are you so passionate about this anyway? Percy asked Naruto while also secretly enjoying his friend's predicament. What do you mean why? He turned to Percy as if he couldn't believe his friend would even ask something like this. Of course, it's my dream to someday stand at the top of this school's delinquents. He exclaimed proudly as he pumped up a fist with a broad grin on his face. I see. That sounds quite interesting indeed. Naruto froze when those words were spoken to him out of nowhere before slowly and shakily, he turned to the speaker. Hey Mr. Brunner. Mr. Brunner was a middle-aged man confined to a motorized wheelchair with thinning brown hair, bushy eyebrows, intense brown eyes, and a scruffy beard who always seemed to wear a frayed tweed jacket. He was their Latin teacher, and while at first glance one would never think of him as someone cool, but when asked, Naruto would be the first one to admit that he was as the coolest teacher in the whole school. He was much more lenient than the rest and would tell stories and jokes and would even let them play games in class. He also had this cool collection of Greek and Roman armors and weapons which he would sometimes bring to class. So as such he was the only teacher whose class didn't put them sleep. However, Naruto will admit to finding him a bit creepy at first due to the fact that when he first arrived, out of nowhere with their previous teacher disappearing at the same time, he had seemed to have had taken quite an interest in both Naruto and Perk. Why and would always stare at them long and hard as if trying to figure them out. It would quite unnerve Naruto with the behavior continuing for about a couple of weeks before Naruto came to learn that he was actually well acquainted with his mother, and those seemingly long weeks of staring had been to confirm his little suspicion. Still though, after learning who Naruto's mother was, he had become much more attentive yet strict when it came to Naruto and Percy too. Yes, hello to you too Naruto. Mr. Brunner nodded at him before turning to the other two and also nodding his greetings, Percy, Grover. Both Percy and Grover nodded but remained silent. It was best if they didn't say anything. Now Naruto, what was it about that dream of yours? Mr. Brunner asked as he looked at Naruto almost accusingly. Haha, now Mr. Brunner. Naruto began as he chuckled nervously while scratching the back of his head. That was just meant to be a joke. You know, to lighten up the mood. He asked more than said lamely. He didn't want his mother to hear about this after all. Mr. Brunner for his part seemed to study Naruto for a long moment before conceding. I see. Well, in any case, as long as it was only a joke then it is fine. Now come along, we have to get going for our class trip. He said one last time before turning to leave. Yes sir, Naruto said before starting to follow Mr. Brunner and was joined by the other two. Sure sucks to have a teacher that knows your mom, doesn't it? Percy whispered to Naruto as he stuffed his hands, along with his pen, in his pockets and walked beside him. Naruto casted a glance at Percy before giving a sigh. Yeah, it does. Maybe you should stop, Grover said as he tried to get Naruto to stop doing what he was doing, which was throwing wads of sandwich at the student sitting in the seat right in front of theirs. Why should I? She started it, Naruto replied as he threw another piece of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich that stuck in wild frizzy red hair. Currently, Naruto along with Grover, Percy, and 28 other mental case kids and 2 teachers were on a yellow school bus heading to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for their class field trip to look at some ancient Greek and Roman stuff. The trip up to that point had mostly been uneventful, with Naruto, Percy, and Grover minding their own business and talking their time away when the resident Yancy bitch, otherwise known as Nancy Bobofit, had thought it was fun to throw pieces of her lunch at Grover. And Naruto, being Naruto, had decided to take it upon himself to retaliate on the behalf of his friend by snatching her entire lunch away, then breaking said lunch into little pieces and throwing them right back at her. This was actually a rather common occurrence, as being a cripple, Grover was considered to be an easy target and subjected to a lot of bullying. That is until Naruto and Percy came into the picture, with the two beating up or getting back at anyone who bullied him. Which was how they ended up getting labeled as delinquents. Despite this, however, the moment their backs were turned, Grover would once more become the target for bullies. One of those bullies, and the most persistent one at that, just so happened to be Nancy Bobofit. The messy and kleptomaniac horrid girl that was also one of the school's biggest bullies. She tended to keep a sweet appearance in front of the teachers, while behind their backs she would bully a lot of kids. She had even tried her luck with Percy and Naruto but got dumped with water from head to toe by RCY, with no one believing her when she complained to the teachers as there was no water source, with Percy suddenly at the other side of the school, and in end she herself got scolded for misbehaving. And with Naruto, well, the fact that the school itself was owned by Naruto's mother aside, he was far too crafty and tended to turn whatever she tried right back at her, with her getting blamed for it all. And so she had decided it was best to just keep away from those two, as things never ended up well for her when she tried anything with them. That still didn't stop her from bullying Grover, however. And due to the fact that she couldn't do anything to Naruto or Percy, she tended to try something with Grover at any chance she got. Don't think you will get away with this, Namikaze, she gritted out while taking the piece of sandwich from her hair as she glared at Naruto. Although she did know that he was going to get away with it, but what else was she to say? Of course I will. Naruto grinned, Ned tauntingly before throwing another piece of food at her. Besides, haven't you heard the old saying, finger the devil and he will finger you right back? All those who heard him sweat dropped and thought collectively. Since when? So if you don't like this happening to you then you shouldn't have started it in the first place. Naruto continued while oblivious to the incredulous looks the others were sending him. Meanwhile, Grover had turned to Percy, who was sitting there as if watching some sort of soap opera while munching on a bag of salt-flavored Lay's, for help in stopping Naruto. Percy merely shrugged at Grover though. He was actually enjoying this, so it's not like he was going to interfere. And so he decided to just kick back and relax while watching Naruto return Yancy Academy's lunch back to her in small, bite-sized pieces. Once the bus had made it to the museum with the students having all piled out, Mr. Brunner had turned to them before telling them to stick together and stay out of trouble, though he had said it to everyone present. Naruto knew that it was mostly pointed at him and Percy. After giving out some more instruction, Mr. Brunner started the museum tour. Riding up the front of the group in his wheelchair, Brunner led them through the big echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. It was impressive, really, that all of these things have survived for thousands of years, but what was even more impressive was the color orange. Clearly, even the gods recognized the greatness of orange. Moving on, Naruto continued to look at the different relics and statues in fascination. Though as he looked at all the different statues of gods, demigods, titans and such, he was struck with a sudden though. And studied the statues with his brow frowned and a thoughtful look on his face. What's gotten you so thoughtful about? Percy asked once he noticed how silent Naruto has been and took a glance to see a deep, thoughtful look on his friend's face. Naruto didn't say anything at first and just studied the different statues before finally addressing Percy. Say Perce. Yeah, he inquired, turning to Naruto as the two trailed behind the rest. Who do you think? Naruto started to say but got interrupted by someone from behind them. Keep up, Jackson, Namikaze. Naruto and Percy turned to the other teacher chaperone, Mrs. Dodds, who was walking at the back of the group. Mrs. Dodds was this little maths teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket even though she was 50 years old. She had come to Yancy halfway through the year when their last maths teacher had a nervous breakdown. From the moment she arrived, she immediately decided that she didn't like Naruto and Percy. He was always giving them the evil eye as if expecting them to do something bad. At first, it was only Percy, but the more she took notice of the close interactions between the two, the more her dislike for Naruto also grew. Naruto and Percy turned to each other and Naruto mouthed, later, with Percy nodding his head in return before the two went to catch up with the rest of the group. Once they caught up, the two noticed that Mr. Brunner had them all gathered around a 4-meter-tall stone column with a big sphinx on top and started to explain how this stone was a grave marker, a steal, for a girl about their age. He even told them about the carvings on the side. Both Naruto and Percy were listening with rapt attention, or at least trying to, as both of them had reasons to learn everything. There was to learn about everything related to Greek gods. However, with everyone around them talking away, it was hard to concentrate, and every time either of them told them to shut up, they would once more receive the evil eyes from Mrs. Dodds. However, both of them ran out of patience when Yancy Academy snickered and muttered something about the naked guy on the stele. Percy was about to tell to shut up when Naruto beat him to it. Yeah, we get that you're a perv who likes to ogle at naked statues, but will you shut up? It come out louder than Naruto had intended and the whole group loud. Get while Yancy Academy went red in the face. Mr. Namikaze. Brunner stopped the story and turned his attention to Naruto. Did you have a comment? No, sir, Naruto replied as he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Then perhaps you can tell us what this picture represents, Brunner said as he pointed at one of the pictures on the stele. Looking at the carving, Naruto instantly recognized it. That's Kronos eating his kids. Yes, Mr. Brunner said, obviously not satisfied. And he did this because of the prophecy given to him by his father, Oranos, who had prophesied that one day Kronos would suffer the same fate at the hands of his own kids before Kronos had chopped him up and thrown his pieces into the ocean. Naruto replied instantly as he actually knew this story pretty well. So when Kronos had his own kids, he realized that they weren't titans but gods. Fearing that his dad's prophecy would come true, he then ate 5 of his kids, but his wife Rhea hid their 6th and youngest kid, Zeus, and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. So when Zeus grew up, he tricked Kronos into barfing up his brothers and sisters. Naruto chose to ignore the EU that came from one of the girls behind him, which then begins the 10-year-long war called the Titanomachy, with the gods winning in the end when they had chopped up Kronos with his own scythe, the same one he had used to chop up his own dad, and had thrown his pieces into Tartarus. When Naruto finished, Percy turned to Naruto with a raised eyebrow before whispering, "You actually know this stuff so well." Naruto looked at Percy out of the corner of his eye and whispered back, "Yeah, well, my mom actually knows pretty much everything about Greek gods and would always tell me different stories ever since I was a little kid." While Naruto replied to Percy, some snickers were heard at the back of the group before Nancy Bobofit mumbled to one of her friends, "Like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on job applications, please explain why Kronos ate his kids. And why Mr. Namikaze." Brunner began, to paraphrase Miss Bobofit's excellent question, "Does this matter in real life?" he asked as he gave Nancy Bobofit a hard glance. "Busted," Grover muttered. "Shut up." Nancy hissed back at Grover, with her face at this point having gone redder than her hair. Paying her no mind, Naruto started to think up an answer but failed to come up with anything. Fortunately, he was saved by Percy, who decided to answer once he noticed that Naruto had noting, "Who knows, but perhaps someday we will come across a Greek god and this information will actually help us." His answer emitted laughs from the rest of the group. However, Naruto was the only one to notice the silent hardening of Percy's eyes as they narrowed ever so slightly while he rubbed his ballpoint pen with his thumb. He also noticed that both Brunner and Grover weren't laughing, but rather Brunner was studying Percy with a critical eye while Grover appeared to be a nervous wreck as he looked at Percy. Naruto for his part rubbed the back of his head. Was he missing something? "I see," Brunner said as realizing something, and Naruto also noticed that he didn't rebut Percy's answer. On that happy note, "It's time for lunch. Mrs. Dodds, would you lead us back outside?" he said, getting a nod from Mrs. Dodds. As the rest of the group drifted outside led by Mrs. Dodds, Naruto chose to stay behind. "You coming?" Naruto turned to see Percy and Grover waiting on him. "Nah, you guys go on ahead and I'll catch up later. There's something I want to ask Brunner," Naruto said, getting a shrug from Percy and a nod from Grover before the two left, following the rest of the group outside. Naruto watched his 2 friends disappear before turning to Brunner to find him looking sadly at the steel, like he had been at the girl's funeral. Naruto shook his head. That was just crazy. With that thought, he immediately made his way over to Mr. Brunner. "Hey, Mr. Brunner," Naruto called out, catching the Latin teacher's attention once he reached him. "Yes, Naruto, is there something you needed?" he asked as he turned his attention to Naruto and away from the steel. "Well, I wanted to ask," Naruto began as he scratched the back of his head, "who stands at the top of this world?" Brunner blinked. "Could you elaborate?" he asked, confused as to what Naruto was trying to ask. "I was thinking that the Titans overthrew their father, who was a primordial god, and then the gods overthrew the Titans and took over the rule of the world. But then the Fates are said to control even the gods, Titans, mortals and other beings as well, but I don't think the Fates control the world itself but rather the destinies of the beings within the world. So going by that, they all control one thing but not another. So I was curious." Naruto paused as he thought over his own question for a bit. "Who stands at the very top?" "You know, who exists at the top of all beings in the world?" Hearing Naruto's rather unnatural question, Brunner was honestly surprised. He had not expected Naruto to question him about something like that. Getting over his surprise, Brunner thought it over for a bit. "Honestly speaking, none that I know of." "What, so there isn't anyone?" Naruto asked as he slumped slightly in disappointment. "However, there is a certain sect that comes to mind," Brunner continued as he held his chin in thought before his face hardened at the thought of the prestigious sect. "Tell me, Naruto, are you familiar with the term, the distinguished heavenly gods?" "Ah, no," Naruto replied as he crossed his arms, having no clue what the distinguished heavenly gods were. How about the 4 heavenly kings? Never heard of 'em. The masters of chaos and order. Nope. Doesn't ring a bell. The 4 emperors. The ones from One Piece. Brunner was silent for a moment. I see. In any case, the distinguished heavenly gods are the 4 almighty entities that came to existence all on their own prior to the creation of the world. He paused here to look at Naruto to see him listening with keen ears. They are thus referred to as the grand first-class singularities, or singular gods. He spoke as Naruto seemed to digest the concept. Legend has it that the 4 heavenly kings were the ones to separate matter from chaos and create the world. Brunner stated, and Naruto's eyes seemed to have widened a portion in interest. It is said that following the gathering of all matter by the 4, one had stepped forth, taking a quarter of all matter and had set it on fire, creating the blazing dome of the pit that covers the void of chaos. He is thus symbolized with the element of creation, fire. Then another had stepped forth, 2, taking a quarter of all matter and turning it to dirt and placing it atop the fires of the pit, creating the earth. He is thus symbolized with the element of creation, earth. Then the third one had stepped forth, taking another fourth of all matter and turning it to water and raining it to fill the craters upon the surface of the earth, creating the oceans and the seas. He is thus symbolized with the elemental of creation, water. Finally, the last one had stepped forth, taking the remaining quarter of all matter and had turned it to air, creating the dome of the sky that protects the world from the vacuum of space. He is thus symbolized with the element of creation, air. Proceeding from there, the 4 heavenly kings then initiate the cycle of creation through these 4 elements and unleash order upon the world, creating the world as it is today. As far as this physical world goes, the distinguished heavenly gods know no equal. However, there are no records of them in mythology, so there is nothing to go by but word of mouth. I see. Still, Naruto spoke as he grinned in fascination. First time I'm hearing of it all, but it all does sound so cool. Brunner couldn't help but chuckle at Naruto's enthusiasm. I wonder if, he stated to think before immediately discarding the thought. It wasn't his place. Come along, Naruto. We don't want to be late for lunch, he said before starting to leave. He stopped though, when he noticed that Naruto had started on the opposite direction. Where are you going, Naruto? He asked, watching him walk away. To the bathroom. Naruto answered from over his shoulder and continued on his way while Brunner shook his head before also going on his way. Damn, I'm late, Naruto muttered to himself as he walked along the empty hallways of the museum trying to find his way back outside and over to his friends so he could have his lunch. He was actually getting hungrier by the second. As Naruto kept on wandering the corridors of the museum, his eyebrow began to twitch and he couldn't help but feel like someone was screwing with him. First, he gets the irresistible urge to take a leak right before lunch. Then ends up getting lost when he goes to find a bathroom and wastes a good chunk of his time, partially due to his dyslexia and partially because the place was just too damn big. Then after he finds the bathroom and relieves himself, he once more ends up getting lost. What the hell? Naruto kept on grumbling to himself as he continued to try find his way back to the others. After some more grumbling and a bit more walking, Naruto finally found himself back where he first started his little adventure, the Greek and Roman section of the museum. However, as he came to a stop within the section, he took notice that he wasn't the only one present there. Mrs. Dodds, Naruto said to himself, before his eyes widened when he felt a familiar feeling of bloodlust. No, a monster, of course. While Naruto was incapable to distinguishing a monster that has disguised itself as a human, the moment they began to show their bloodlust, Naruto could instantly recognize them. It has been this why ever since he first came to know monsters existed. Though he didn't know why Mrs. Dodds had disguised herself as their maths teacher for the past half year, nor did he know as to why she had not made a move or shown her bloodlust till now. If she was a monster, then Naruto was going to take her out. That's how it has always been. Besides, it's not like he was actually going to miss her. With that thought and newfound conviction, Naruto started to make his way over to Mrs. Dodds, who had her back turned to him at the moment as she studied a big marble frieze of the Greek gods with her arms crossed. Naruto could clearly make out the growling noise she was making over the silence of the section as he drew closer to her. Most likely wanting to pulverize it. Now Percy, honey, she began to sigh without turning to him as he came to a stop a few meters away from her. So she was after Percy. Naruto didn't know her reason, but he'd be damned if he let this monster anywhere near his friend. Sorry, but Percy won't be coming. So you'll just have to deal with me. Naruto cut her off as the skin of his right hand began turning red as steam started to come off of it with tiny flames flickering to life around his fingers and hand. The moment she heard Naruto speak, Mrs. Dodds turned to Naruto and her growl became louder. You, she hissed in displeasure. Me, Naruto returned mockingly as the flames on his right hand continued to grow ever so slightly. Mrs. Dodds then tsked. I was going to confront Percy directly, but seeing how closely acquainted you two are, I am sure you were also involved with the theft. She stated as her eyes began to glow. Now where is it? Naruto looked at Mrs. Dodds blankly before, He tilted his head to the side and a big question mark made out of flames flew overhead. Do not play dumb with me, Naruto Namikaze. She snarled at him, the glow in her eyes growing more prominent. We are not fools. It was only a matter of time before we found the both of you out. Now confess and you will suffer less pain. Naruto continued to look at her weirdly. He was honestly lost as to what she was talking about. And weren't monsters supposed to only be interested in eating him? So just what the hell was Mrs. Dodds going on about? Well, she demanded impatiently. Sorry but, Naruto began as he scratched the back of his head with his flaming hand, which in turn set his hair on fire. You really have me lost here, he said, paying no mind to his currently on fire head. I see. In that case I will just have to kill you and then confront Percy. She iced before the glow in her eyes grew even bigger, with her eyes now resembling barbecue coals. Her fingers stretched and turned to talons. Her jacket melted into large, leathery wings and her teeth grew into sharp yellow fangs. She had finally taken on her monster form. That of a shriveled hag with bat wings, claws and a mouth full of yellow fangs ready to chew him raw. Naruto whistled. Wow, you were ugly enough as it was. And I didn't think it was possible, but you just got even uglier. Naruto commented, actually sounding impressed before a grin overtook his face. All right, ugliest. I'm glad you took on your uglier form. Ugly as you were, I don't think I could have roasted an old lady, but the way you are now, I can burn you to ashes without a second thought. Just when Naruto made that statement, the flames around him all erupted into an inferno that covered his entire right side, with the flames on his face morphing and giving him a menacing appearance, especially with that grin still on his face. Mrs. Dodds, though, didn't appear to be affected by Naruto's display of power in the least. And if she was, then she certainly didn't show it. Foolish honey, she said as he flapped wings and floated a couple feet above Naruto. I am a creature of the underworld. Playing with fire is my very job. You can't burn me with those flames of yours. Naruto, though, grinned even wider at her statement. Why don't we see about that then? Naruto said as he made a come at me gesture at Mrs. Dodds. Mrs. Dodds for her part snarled once more before lunging at Naruto. Die, honey. Just when she made it within Naruto's range and made a move to bite out his throat, Naruto, moving faster, placed his right hand right in her face and released a large amount of flames that completely engulfed her. What followed next were Mrs. Dodds' blood-curdling screams as she was burned to ashes down to her very bones. Can't be burned by my flames, you say? Naruto started as he looked down at her ashes with his grin still present. Yeah. I've lost count of how many times I've heard that before, but in all those times there never was a monster that wasn't burned to ashes by my flames. That's quite the fearsome power you have. Naruto blinked at the sudden voice before he turned to find Percy standing behind him, looking impressed as he watched Mrs. Dodds' ashes disperse into the wind. Ah, hey Percy, Naruto asked while inwardly wondering how long he had been there. Percy was silent for a moment as he walked over to Naruto. So, Percy started as he turned his attention over to Naruto and decided to cut to the chase. You're a demigod too. Naruto blinked before his face lit up in excitement. You mean you're a demigod too? Naruto exclaimed with an excited grin on his face. His was the first time he had met another demigod, and it was his friend. Yep, Percy replied before a teasing grin broke on his face. Don't tell me you hadn't figured it out already. He teased Cow, sing Naruto to flush slightly in embarrassment. I totally had. He exclaimed, giving Percy a thumbs up with a grin on his face. Although, he did not make eye contact with Percy as he said this and his grin was a bit awkward. Percy's sweat dropped. Yep, you're lying. It was expected really. Despite the trouble he seemed to get in most of the time, Naruto was actually a pretty honest guy and had zero talent for lying. So anyways, Naruto immediately decided to change the subject. So who's your dad? It is your dad, right? Naruto asked excitedly, wanting to know more about his fellow demigod. Yep, my dad, Percy relied while pointing towards a certain statue. Following Percy's finger, Naruto's eyes widened when he saw him pointing at the statue of a man with a trident in hand. No way, man. The sea god. That's so cool, Naruto exclaimed in excitement before a thought hit him. Wait, so you've actually met your dad? Percy shrugged in response. Not really. No. So then, Naruto was confused now. How do you know who your dad is? Did your mom tell you? The moment Naruto mentioned Percy's mom, he knew he shouldn't have done that when he took notice of Percy's eyes flashing with something. He was about to apologize when Percy gave an uninterested shrug. You figure it out when you have monsters running after you while screaming, "Let's have son of the sea god for dinner." Percy answered, his eyes having returned to normal. Naruto for his part gave a weak chuckle. Yeah, I guess you do, he said lamely. That was also how he first came to know that he was a demigod. Aving that aside though, what was that with Percy just now? What about you? Percy asked. Was the only thing that Naruto could make out as he was broken out of his thoughts. Who is your dad? Percy asked. Seeing how Naruto already lived with his mother, he could guess that his godly parent was his father. Well, Naruto trailed off as he scratched the back of his head. I don't know. You don't? Percy asked a bit confused. With the way Naruto handled his power, he was sure he knew. And didn't your mom tell you? No. And I did used to ask my mom about my dad, but each time I asked, she would get this sad look in her eyes before telling me to be patient and that one day I will know everything. So after a while, I got the message and stopped asking. I decided to just wait for the day I get to meet dad. But you know, Naruto once more trailed off as a far-off look appeared in his eyes. Percy waited curiously for Naruto to continue. Despite knowing that I haven't met my dad, and my mom telling me that my dad haven't been with us ever since I was just a newborn, Naruto paused, trying to find the right words. I have these memories or visions or whatever where I am with a man whose face I can't see. I am just a kid within those memories, barely a couple of years old, but sometimes I remember him playing with me, comforting me when I was hurt or the both of us taking a nap and other such memories. But when I asked mom, she said he was never there. But Naruto once more paused and looked at Percy with a convinced gaze. I think he was there. Percy was silent when Naruto finished his tale. He seemed to be pondering on what he had just learned and shared. Well, there is nothing we can do about it, he finally said before going and draping an arm over Naruto's shoulder. We'll just have to keep moving forward till the day we finally get to meet both our dads, Percy stated with conviction as he grinned at Naruto before raising his fist. Naruto returned wise grin with one of his own before bumping their fists. The two then started to make their way out of the museum while chatting away, unaware of the eyes following their forms. Coming out of the shadows, Brunner shook his head. Guess he wasn't needed after all. With that thought, he started on his way back. Meanwhile, as Naruto and Percy made it back outside, Naruto turned to the sky covered by dark clouds and grinned as a single thought crossed his mind. Just you wait, Dad, I'll definitely come to meet you again. Meanwhile, an unknown location. In an unknown place, within a room shrouded in darkness, the figure of a single man sitting regally could be made out through the dim light provided by the number of fireflies that flew around him. He appeared to be a young man in his early 20s of average height and build. He had hair like pure gold that seemed to spike here and there with two jaw-length bangs framing either side of his face. while his attire consisted of flowing black robes with gold rims. He was handsome, incredibly so, and seemed to have an ethereal glow about him that told anyone who laid eyes upon him that he was not an earthly being. He continued to just rest silently with his eyes closed, appearing to be quite peaceful. That was when he heard the words spoken to him. "Just you wait, Dad, I'll definitely come to meet you again." Opening his eyes for the first time to reveal two cerulean blue orbs that were the same shade as Naruto's, he smiled. Being a demigod, Naruto was used to the occasional strange occurrences. But now he can honestly say things had gotten weird even by his standards. It had all started after he had incinerated Mrs. Dodds. No, scratch that. It had all began with the moment Mrs. Dodds had revealed herself to be a monster. And later when he and Percy had gone back outside to find Grover sitting by the fountain, a museum map tented over his head, was when the strange started to turn weird. The moment Grover had seen the two, or more precisely, Percy, he had released a poorly concealed sigh of relief and had, unintentionally, blurted out, "Thank the gods you're all right." Naruto had found that odd. It had been Hen that he had taken notice of the glint in Percy's eyes before he had also said, "Of course we're all right." It was just Mrs. Dodds after all. Percy's response had earned him a series of nervous fidgets from Grover before he had asked, "Who's Mrs. Dodds?" Now normally after a monster attack, such a response wouldn't really surprise Naruto, but considering the facts that Grover wouldn't look at he two of them with the tips of his ears turning pink, Naruto knew he had been lying. If there was one thing about Grover, it was that he was an even worse liar than Naruto. But before anything else could have been said, a completely drenched Yancy Bobofit alongside her ugly friends had appeared beside them before saying to Percy gleefully, "I hope Mrs. Kerr whipped your butt." By this point, Naruto had been plain confused. Why did Grover still remember Mrs. Dodds after he had killed her? He knew Grover wasn't a demigod. Naruto had confirmed it with Percy, and he most likely wasn't a clear S-ided mortal like his mom either, or else why would he try to act like he didn't remember Mrs. Dodds? But more than that, normally, when Naruto had an incident with a monster disguised as a human, its existence was then gone from the people's memories, with there being some lame-ass story of how life continued on without such a person. So then, who the hell was this perky blonde woman that had dropped head out of nowhere and at the same time he had killed Mrs. Dodds no less? Naruto knew that it wasn't the work of a god. He had killed enough disguised monsters with there never being a replacement for them to know that no god will ever waste their time replacing the disguised existences of a monster from some humans' lives. After that day, the weirdness had continued to get even weirder. And it had nothing to do with the fact that his classmates continued to act like Mrs. Kerr had been their maths teacher all along. He had once caught Percy rolling his eyes and muttering, "Missed," to himself. No, it was the bad weather that just kept getting worse, with earthquakes, floods, and thunderstorms forming all around the world. At first, Naruto hadn't really thought much of it, thinking that the odds were probably having one of their moods. That is until he had taken notice of how it had appeared like the sky and sea were at war with each other. That was when he came to the conclusion that something had the gods pissed. And it had something to do with Percy. What made him come to this realization was Percy's behavior for the coming weeks. Normally, Percy had an aloof and devil-may-care attitude. But for some reason, with the weather getting worse, Naruto could have sworn that the winds seemed to have something against Percy. His attitude took a 180 as he got cranky and irritable. And sometimes even restless and agitated. During those times he would have this dark look on his face that would scare away even the teachers and Yancy Bobofit. Finally, after his grades slipped own CDs to Fs, Naruto couldn't even enjoy the little victories as being dyslexic and ADHD. Both of them were at the bottom of the class and had this little thing going on to see who gets a better grade than the other. Percy finally snapped at their English teacher by calling him an old sot. Whatever that meant, Naruto had then prepared to give his mom a call to make sure that Percy still stayed within the school after he got called to the headmaster's office. Thankfully though, it appeared that Naruto didn't need to when the headmaster announced that due to suffering from some sort of stress disorder, Percy was to be excused for his less than favorable behavior. Naruto had given Percy a deadpan look at that, who for his part had only shrugged in response. Because Percy never really opened up about what was up with him. Naruto knew pretty much nothing other than it having something to do with Percy's dad and about some dreams he had begun to have. Furthermore, it wasn't just Percy who was acting weird. Brunner and Grover were also acting strangely too, and if Naruto had to say, similar to Percy with the two showing the same level of restlessness or agitation. Brunner though, AP. Paired much more in control as Naruto would only accidentally catch him with such looks. Other times he acted as professional as always. Seeing the three behaving like this, Naruto couldn't help but feel left out. To him, they acted like they knew something that he didn't. And it sucked. Coming back to reality with head dropping on the open book in front of him, Naruto sighed. With everything that has been going on, he really couldn't concentrate on his studies for the finals. It was even more so for Percy who, at that very moment, threw the book he had been holding across the dorm room before dragging a hand over his face. Watching Percy pace around the room, Naruto commented after a moment of silence, "Can't concentrate too, I see." Turning to look at Naruto for a bit, Percy sighed before plopping down on the bed. "Yeah," he muttered tiredly. It seemed that with everything that has been happening, his dyslexia had gone up to a whole new level. And it sucks too. I really wanted to get a decent enough grade on at least Brunner's test, he commented while looking up at the ceiling. Naruto hummed to himself as if contemplating it. In that case, why don't you use your magic on Brunner? That should do the trick. Percy couldn't help but roll his eyes at the lame joke. Nah, it doesn't work on Brunner. And it was true indeed. The mist had no effect on neither Brunner nor Grover whatsoever. Now normally, something like that would put him on guard, but Percy had enough experience with those meaning him harm to know that neither of them bore any ill will towards him and Naruto. The two genuinely cared for them, enough to worry about their well-being. Standing up from his sitting position, Percy turned to Naruto. "Why don't we go to Brunner?" he suggested, cutting Naruto off from making a comment about his previous statement. "If it's Brunner, we should be able to concentrate enough to actually get some studying done for tomorrow's exam." Naruto looked at Percy at that, before looking back at the book to see the words dancing all over the pages, then back at Percy again. "You know what?" Naruto started as he closed the book shut, swung his legs over the bed, and stood up. "Yeah, let's just do that." Quote, it wasn't long before the two found themselves walking downstairs to the faculty offices. Almost all of them were dark and empty save for Mr. Brunner's with he door ajar and the light from his window stretching across the hallway floor. Right when they were 3 steps away from the door, was when they heard the voices inside. It appeared that Mr. Brunner asked a question that neither of them could quite catch before a voice that was without a doubt Grover's said, "Worried about Percy and Naruto, sir." Naruto froze and Percy stiffened. Now Naruto wasn't usually an eavesdropper, having been taught it was bad manners, but as things stood, there was no way he could walk away while one of his best friends talked about him and his other best friend. To an adult who just so happened to be his favorite teacher. While Percy for his part didn't care either way. If Grover and Brunner were discussing about him and Naruto, then he was going to listen. Looking at each other for a moment, both of them inched closer. Alone this summer, the two of them heard Grover saying, "I mean, a kindly one in the school. Now that we know for sure, and they know too, we would only make the matters worse by rushing the two, especially Percy." Brunner interrupted Grover's rant. "There are still a great many things we don't know about the two. But Percy may not have time. The summer solstice deadline will have to be resolved without him." Brunner once more cut Grover off. "I can't help the feeling that things aren't quite what they appear to be." "Sir, you can't possibly mean that he could have done it." "No, that's not what I meant. Despite admitting that there is more to the boy than meets the eye, he is a lot like his father in that regard, so I do not believe that he could have done it." Hearing what Brunner had just said, both Naruto and Percy had their eyes widened before they once more heard Grover speak. "Sir, I can't fail in my duties again." Grover's voice was chocked with emotions as he said this. You know what that would mean. His voice was so thick that both of them couldn't help but wonder what could have happened. "You haven't failed, Grover," Mr. Brunner said kindly to Grover's obvious distress. I should have seen her for what she was. Now let's just worry about keeping Percy alive until next autumn. Just then, as if in a stroke of bad luck, Naruto, intending to take a peek inside the classroom, accidentally hit the book in Percy's hand. It dropped with a thud and everything went eerily silent. Ah, Naruto B. Linked at the book on the floor, then looked up at Percy as the two stared at each other blankly. Without saying a word nor breaking eye contact with Naruto, Percy slowly reached for the book on the floor and picked it up. Then on an unspoken signal, the two bolted back to where they came from. As the two continued to run down the hall, Naruto took the chance to look back only to see the shadow of something much taller than his wheelchair-bound teacher, followed by the slow clop 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 just before the scene behind them disappeared, and the two soon made it back to the dorm. Closing the door behind them as they entered the dorm room, Naruto and Percy sat on their individual beds, facing each other. So, now that we are sure those two aren't humans, Naruto began to say, giving a serious pause, what the hell did you do? Percy rolled his eyes at Naruto's comment before replying with a shrug. Not even I know what the hell it is that I had supposedly done. Naruto also gave a shrug, bef. Or changing the subject to something that was bugging him. Anyways, what's up with Brunner and Grover? I know they are not monsters out to get us. Heck, they seemed more worried about us if anything. Especially you, and to the point of implying that you were in the danger of getting killed. Thinking over what Naruto had just said, and while Percy didn't know as to who they were exactly, he did have a pretty good guess about them. I don't think we have to worry about them. Besides, Grover is still our friend, Percy said, getting a nod of agreement from Naruto on the last part. But you're right that they are not monsters. They are probably from that place. Quote, Naruto's eyebrow rose when Percy stressed that place, and couldn't help but ask, what place? The place where? Percy stared. To say when he suddenly stopped and turned his head to the door right before it opened and Grover in walked. Naruto and Percy briefly made eye contact and came to the unspoken agreement to put off the discussion for a later date. Hey guys, Grover greeted with bleary eyes. Yo, G-man, Naruto greeted back while Percy just gave an acknowledging nod to Grover. Walking over to the two, Grover took notice of the closed books by their sides and got slightly worried. You two going to be alright for tomorrow's test? Hearing this, the two immediately groaned. With the excitement of the moment, the Y had completely forgotten about the damn test and only now came to remember exactly why they had gone to Mr. Brunner's office in the first place. And now worse, whatever little preparation they had done before had completely vanished from their heads. The two of them then came to the same conclusion. Tomorrow was gonna blow. Seeing their reactions, Grover couldn't help but sweat drop. I will take that as a no. When the next afternoon rolled by, true to their conclusion last night, it had blown big time. Leaving the 3-hour-long Latin exam, Naruto and Percy were exhausted, both mentally and even physically. Their eyes were still swimming with all the Greek and Roman names they had misspelled. Instead of a test, it had felt more like they had just been through a nightmare. Naruto could even hear Percy mumbling to himself about things like how he couldn't believe he just got defeated by a paper test. Not that Naruto could blame him though. He himself had taken on many scary monsters before and had always come out on top, no problem. But now he couldn't believe that he had been so helpless against a paper test of all things. And so, Naruto and Percy came to realize of the evil that was known as paper test. However, just as they left the classroom, they got called back by Brunner. For a moment, Naruto got a little worried that he found out about their eavesdropping last night and stole a glance at Percy to see that he once more didn't appear to even care, but when Brunner started to speak, Naruto was secretly relieved that that wasn't the case. Naruto, Percy, Brunner started in a low voice so that only the two of them could hear, the two of you aren't bad students. Hearing Brunner's unusual words, and admittedly it was the first time they had been called not bad students. Something they were sure that the other teachers would wholeheartedly disagree with. Naruto and Percy looked at each other, wondering where he was going with this. But the two of you lack the focus for lessons, Brunner said sternly, causing the two to fidget slightly under his gaze. But hey, it's not like it was their fault that they both had ADHD. So excuse them for their short attention spans. And it has been especially so during this last semester. But I realize that you have been dealing with some issues, so I am willing to let it slide. While both Naruto and Percy were silently glad for this, they couldn't help but feel like something else was coming. And that came to be true when Brunner spoke again. However, when next we meet, I expect only the best from you two. He said this in such a serious tone that the two in question could do nothing but nod wordlessly. Good, you are free to leave then. Hearing this, the two wasted no time in leaving the classroom immediately afterwards. As the two walked side by side down the hallways, Naruto turned to Percy and spoke. Was it just me, or did it seem like Brunner was talking about something other than his Latin class when he said that? Percy looked at Naruto from the corner of his eye for a moment before replying, it wasn't just you. He was definitely talking about something else when he said that. Though the question was, what was it that Brunner expected only the best from them? On the last day of the term, Naruto watched Percy pack his things while he played with a little red ball by throwing it into the air and catching it. Some other guys near them were joking around, talking about their vacation plans. Listening to them talk about where they will be going for the summer, once more reminded Naruto that these idiots may be juvenile delinquents like them, but they were rich juvenile delinquents. He then took notice of one of the guys turning and asking Percy about where he was going for the summer. Not even sparing the guy a glance, Percy answered simply, Montauk. Oh, one of the guys said. That's cool. And with that they all once more went back to talking like Percy didn't even exist. Who for his part didn't appear to even care. However, hearing Percy's answer got Naruto thinking. He knew that going to Montauk was a sort of common thing for Percy, as he had once told Naruto that it was his home, but Naruto found it a bit strange that Percy would always go to Montauk for every break they got and would disappear in the process until reappearing back at school after the breaks ended. It couldn't be all that fun, could it? That was when he got the brilliant idea. Hey Percy, Naruto called out, catching Percy's attention. Yeah, Percy turned his attention to Naruto after he finished packing his things. I was thinking, he answered as he went and stood in front of Percy. You go to Montauk at every break we get. Yeah, so, Percy eyed Naruto a bit strangely, wonder where he was going with this. I already told you it's my home. Yeah, but it's got to get boring after a while. So how about a change of plans this year? He suggested with a grin. Percy or his part merely raised an eyebrow at this, waiting for Naruto to continue. I was thinking that we can visit Montauk like you always do, but we stay only for a few days. Naruto said with the grin still present on his face. And just when it looked like Percy was about to say something, Naruto continued, after that, you can come and spend the rest of the summer with me and Grandma. This time, both of Percy's eyebrows rose at Naruto's suggestion before he asked, what about your mom? Naruto shrugged. My mom's away because of some family issues that I don't know about. So she'll probably be away for the summer. He replied simply. While he missed his mom's presence around the house, he still got to talk to her over the phone quite frequently. When it looked like Percy was about to say something, Naruto once more interrupted him by going and draping an arm over Percy's shoulder and pressing on. Come on, it's going to be awesome. Besides, we'll be spending the summer with my grandma and I just know she'll adore you. And you know it's going to be way more fun if we spend the summer together. Percy couldn't help but roll his eyes at Naruto's pestering. Although, he supposed it couldn't be all that bad. He will get the chance to visit his mom at Montauk, so spending the rest of the summer with his blonde best friend and his grandma should be interesting. Plus, he did agree that it would be fun. Coming to a decision, Percy gave a shrug before accepting, sure, why not? Naruto couldn't help the broad grin that came over his face at Percy's acceptance before commenting, cool. So let's head for my home first. We can get Grandma to drive us to Montauk then. Sitting on the Greyhound bus along with Percy, Naruto found it odd that Grover would somehow also end up booking a ticket on the same Greyhound as they had. He shrugged though, thinking nothing more of it, as both he and Percy knew that it was no coincidence that Grover would end up on the same bus as them. However, constant fidgets from Grover as he looked down the aisle, watching the other passengers as if expecting something to pop out and eat the three of them up was annoying him ever so slightly. Despite Had fact that it was sort of habitual for Grover to get like this whenever they left Yancy. Those times, however, he had always thought that it was because he was worried about getting bullied. Now he knew that was never the case though. Finally having enough, Naruto blurted out, looking for the kindly ones. Grover nearly jumped out of his seat at this. What do you mean? Looking at Percy, for a moment to see him shrug back at him, Naruto turned back to Grover and confessed about eavesdropping on him and Mr. Brunner the night before the exam, which caused Grover's eyebrow to twitch before he asked, "How much did you hear?" This time instead of Naruto, it was Percy who answered, "Oh, not much," he started before his eyes turned slightly cold. "What's the summer solstice deadline?" Grover couldn't help but wince slightly at Percy's tone and the look he was giving him. "Look, Percy, I was just worried about you and Naruto, see? I mean, hallucinating about fighting demon maths teachers." Grover, cutting Percy off, Grover just continued on with his rant like Percy never even spoke up, "And I was telling Mr. Brunner that maybe you were overstressed or something, because there is no such person as Mrs. Dodson." Grover, this time Naruto started as he gave a deadpan, if slightly unimpressed look at Grover, "You're a really, really bad liar." Percy nodded along with the same deadpan look as Naruto. Who the hell was Grover trying to fool here? Sure, he had mentioned Mrs. Dodds before, but neither he nor Naruto had told him about fighting Mrs. Dodds or anything, but he understood. Grover was really, really bad at this stuff. Ears turning an even darker shade of pink, Grover went to fish out a grubby business card. "Just take this, okay? In case you need me this summer." Looking at Grover for a moment before looking at the card that was in some fancy script, which was murder for their dyslexic eyes, Naruto and Percy finally made out something like Grover Underwood, Keeper Half-Blood Hill, Long Island, New York 800-009-0009. Looking at the Half-Blood Hill part, Percy's eyes narrowed. Naruto, though, appeared to be confused before going to ask Grover more about it. "What's half?" Panicking slightly, Grover immediately yelped out, "Don't say it out loud." However, looking at Naruto's confused stare, he said, "That's my, summer address." Hearing the last part, Naruto couldn't help but stare at Grover curiously. So like, Grover was from some rich family too. Nah, that possibly couldn't be it. Dismissing his previous thoughts, he inquired further. "Okay. So, like, if we decide to come visit you." Grover nodded in response before adding, or if you need me." "Why would we need you?" It came out colder than Percy had intended as he watched Grover and even Naruto flinch slightly. He couldn't help it though, despite his attitude most of the time, he was just as impulsive as Naruto. Blushing right down to his Adam's apple, Grover started once more. "Look Percy, the truth is, I kind of have to protect you too." Naruto and Percy stared at Grover, both finding it incredulous. All year long, both of them had gotten in fights keeping bullies away from him, and here he was saying he was to protect them. Now granted, Naruto knew that it wasn't about that and had something to do with them being demigods, but it was still unbelievable to him. Besides, Naruto was strong. And ever since finding out about Percy being a demigod too, Naruto has been able to sense his aura and could tell that Percy was just as strong as him. So excuse him for finding it weird. "Grover," Naruto started, deciding to pry a bit further into things, "what exactly is it that you are protecting us from?" However, just as Naruto asked this, and before Grover could even open his mouth to answer, there was a huge grinding noise from under their feet. Black smoke then poured out from the dashboard and the whole bus was filled with a smell like rotten eggs. Cursing to himself, the driver limped the bus over to the side of the highway. After a few minutes of clanking around in the engine compartment, the river announced that they all had to get off. Following everybody else, Naruto, Percy, and Grover filed out of the bus. Stepping outside, Naruto noticed that they were on a stretch of a county road, no place you would notice if you didn't break down there. He looked around on their side of the highway to see that there was nothing but maple trees everywhere save for the old-fashioned fruit stand, situated right under the maple trees. The stuff on side looked really good. Heaping boxes of blood-red cherries and apples, walnuts and apricots, jugs of cider in a clawfoot tub full of ice. There were no customers, just 3 old ladies sitting in rocking chairs in the shade of a maple tree and knitting the biggest pair of socks he had ever seen. The lady on the left knitted one, the lady on the right knitted the other, while the lady in the middle held an enormous basket of electric blue yarn. All 3 looked ancient, with pale wrinkled faces, silver hair tied back in white bandanas and bony arms sticking out of bleached cotton dresses. But not minding any of those, Naruto was more focused on the fruits that were making him feel hungry. He even chose to ignore that the 3 were looking directly at him and Percy. Turning to the other 2, Naruto went to say something but stopped and blinked when he saw a curious yet knowing look on Percy's face, while Grover looked like a ghost with how white he had turned at the sight of the 3 old ladies as every last drop of blood had drained from his face. His nose was twitching too. Before Naruto could ask if he was okay, Grover turned to him and Percy shakily before saying in a freaked out voice, "Tell me they are not looking at you too." "They are, aren't they?" "Yeah," Percy began in a curious tone. "Weird, huh? You think those socks would fit me?" Naruto couldn't help but snort at Percy's lame joke, while Grover, if at all possible, freaked out even more. "Not funny, Percy. Not funny at all." Just as Grover said this, his breath got caught in his throat when the lady in the middle took out a huge pair of scissors, gold and silver, long-bladed, like shears. In that moment, still watching Percy and Naruto, the middle one cut the yarn, and Percy could swear that the snip could be heard across even the 4 lanes of traffic. The other 2 then balled up the electric blue socks, leaving the 2 wondering. Grover couldn't take it anymore at this point. "We're getting on the bus," he said to the 2. "Come on." "What?" Percy turned to Grover. "It's 1,000 degrees in there." Before Grover could protest, and as if things couldn't get any worse for Grover, Naruto actually started to walk towards the 3 old ladies. "Wait," Grover called out, his heart starting to sink as he watched the blonde casually walk towards the freaking fates. "Where are you going, Naruto?" Naruto for his part just kept walking. "Where do you think?" he called out from over his shoulder. "I'm hungry, so I'm gonna go get us some apples." "Wah!" Just as Grover went to protest and make to move to go and stop Naruto, one of the fates looked directly at him and he froze in place. Percy for his part, while curious on how this will play out, stiffened as he watched his blonde friend approach the 3 fates. He took hold of his pen with his thumb, going over to rub and play with Cap, ready to take it off at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, not minding Grover, Naruto just causally strode over to the 3 ladies before stopping right in front of them. "Yo," he greeted the 3 old ladies who merely regarded him silently. Deciding to not beat around the bush, Naruto pointed a thumb at the fruit boxes. "I need some apples." Quote, Naruto will then silently admit to himself that he did not expect the kind smiles he got from the 3 before. The one on the left told him in a similarly kind voice, "But of course, dear. Take as many as you would like." Deciding to not ponder on his previous thought, Naruto grinned at the 3. "In that case, I'll take 3. He said before moving over to the fruit stand and picking up an apple. "One for me." He then picked a second one. "One for Percy." Finally he picked up a 3rd apple. "And one for G-Man." Along with his freshly acquired apples. He then went back to the old ladies and asked, "So how much will this be?" This time the middle one answered him, "Oh, it costs nothing, dear. It is free for you." He was slightly confused as to why it would be free for him, but then only shrugged and chalked it off as the being kind old ladies before grinning once at them. "Cool, thanks grannies." He waved at the 3 before walking back over to his friends, unaware of the glowing, gem-like blue eyes that follow his form. Once Naruto made it back to his friends, both of whom very relieved that he made it back alive, Naruto tossed each an apple. "Here," he said before biting into his own without a second thought. Meanwhile, the reactions of his 2 friends vastly differed from his own. Percy was looking at the apple curiously, as if wondering if he should eat it or take it home with him as a souvenir. While Grover held his apple with trembling hands and looked at it like it was the very definition of an abomination. Seeing that Grover definitely won't be eating his, Naruto turned and asked, "If you're not gonna eat that, then can I have it?" Grover's response was to toss Naruto the apple like it had just burned him. Which was totally strange for him, as normally Grover would never turn away from eating an apple. Percy blinked, breaking out of his thought at Naruto's voice, and looked to see that he was already done with his first one. That was fast. Naruto shrugged. I told you I was hungry, he answered before starting on his second apple. Percy also shrugged and decided to just eat his two. Just then, at the rear of the bus, the driver wrenched out a big chunk of smoking metal out of the engine compartment. The bus then shuddered, and the engine came back to life and the passengers cheered. Darn right, the bus driver yelled, slapping the bus with his hat. Everybody back on board. Once they all got back on the bus and got going again, Naruto and Percy noticed that Grover didn't look so good. He was shivering with his teeth chattering, like he'd just caught the flu. Hey, Naruto began to say with a concerned frown, you alright, G-man? Instead of answering, Grover said something else entirely. Let me walk you two home from the bus station. Promise me. Hearing Grover's strange request, Naruto and Percy looked at each other before Percy turned back to Grover and said, yeah, sure. Grover didn't appear to feel any better about the reply and looked at the two mournfully, like he was already picking the kind of flowers they would like best on their coffins. After that he turned to himself and started mumbling about how it was always 6th grade, and how they never get it past 6th grade. Looking at the weird behavior of Grover, Naruto whispered to Percy, let's just ditch G-man after this. He was seriously freaking him out now. Yeah, I was thinking the same, Percy replied before changing subjects and asking something that was on his mind. By the way, Naruto, you do know that those three back there were the three fates? Yeah, I know, Naruto replied disinterestedly. And you still pulled that stunt back there? Percy questioned with a raised an eyebrow. Even he was unnerved by the fates, and there was practically nothing that he knew of that could even faze him at this point. Because, Naruto began in an almost bored tone, I don't believe in fate. Now Percy was both confused and curious. But you already said that you knew about them. Just because I know those three exist does not mean I believe in fate, Naruto answered like it was the most obvious thing. Herc. Wise eyes widened for a bit as realization of what Naruto was saying finally drowned on him. So that's how it is, he said with a light grin. He actually liked that point. Oh, and Naruto, there is something else I wanted to know too. He waited for Percy continue. When you went to get the apples, did you notice someone else there too? Aside from the fates? Naruto blinked and thought back on it. Not really, no, I don't think there was anyone else there. That's weird. Percy could have sworn he noticed someone else there too. Was I just imagining it? Meanwhile, back with the fates. The three fates sat there silently, watching as the bus disappeared into the distance before Clotho, the fate of birth, started. Pardon me for asking, my lord. Saying this, she along with her two sisters slowly stood up from their chairs and got down on their knees and lowered their heads, bowing to the golden-haired man sitting there, his back leaning on the trunk of the maple tree right beside to theirs. But are you sure that you did not even want to meet him in person? He was dressed casually in black denim jeans and a white button-up shirt with the first few buttons left undone and sleeved rolled up to his elbows. There was also the symbol of a golden flame on the back, right between the shoulders. He was barefoot. While lying on his lap was a small kitten with a flaming blue body, two tails, and heterochromatic eyes. Looking at the three with a smile on his face while he continued to scratch the kitten behind the ear, causing it to purr, he then answered, yes. It was not yet time for us to meet face to face. Saying this, he proceeded to get up from his sitting position on the ground before making his way over to where Naruto had previously stood. Reaching out and touching the place from where Naruto had picked up his apples, his two fingers got wrapped in a small flame. So this is his chakra. He let a small smile play on his face as he watched the fire burn comfortable on his fingers. Turning his head to look at the blue kitten that had suddenly appeared on the same spot Percy had previously stood, he addressed, what do you think of the other one, Matabi? She put one of her small paws on the ground and blue flame-like energy light up before it turned to water and disappeared. His chakra is on par with that of Naruto-kun's, Minato-sama. The kitten, named Matabi, spoke. For a demigod, Even if a child of the Big Three, this should not be possible. The three fates stiffened at this. Is that so? The man, now named Minato, turned his eyes to the three. The gesture having not escaped him. He merely smiled once more though. Come Matabi, it's time to go, he said, turning and starting to walk away. Right. Matabi nodded her little head. Before leaping and faster than one could blink their eyes, she appeared in Minato's arms. Oh, and Minato started once more as he paused in his walk. I will be gone for a while, so I am leaving Naruto in your care, he said, addressing the fates. As you wish, Lord. The three fates nodded their heads, unquestioningly, once more turning and starting to way away. There is something else I want you to do as well, Minato once more started to say as he dissolved into brilliant golden flames and disappeared, his voice ringing all around the fates. I want you to lead him to Kurama. True to their word, Naruto and Percy had ditched Grover as soon as the bus had made it to the terminal. Yeah, they knew it was rude. But Grover had been freaking them out ever since their encounter with the fates. And not to mention, it had also started to get annoying with how he had been looking at the two of them like they were dead men while muttering things like, why does this always happen? And, why does it always have to be 6th grade? And other such things. Luckily for them, whenever he got upset, Grover's bladder started acting up. So it wasn't really a surprise to the two when just as soon as they got off the bus, he made them promise to wait for him, before making a beeline for the restroom. Taking the opportunity, and instead of waiting, they had gotten their things, slipped outside, and caught the first taxi uptown. Which was how the two currently found themselves standing in front of Naruto's home. It wasn't anything too grand. A modest 2-story house with a parking space, where a red Range Rover stood parked. And a wide lawn with green grass and flowers of all kinds decorating it. From what Naruto knew, this house used to belong to his dad, where he would stay whenever he would come to New York, but had given it to his mom when she had been pregnant with him, before he had disappeared from their lives. Oftentimes Naruto would wonder what it would have been like if his dad hadn't disappeared and had stayed with them. He could imagine what it would have been like, but in the end it was just his imagination, and he knew that it was too far off from what it would be like in reality. After all, he knew nothing about his dad. He didn't know what he looked like, or even what his name was. Despite how much Naruto wanted to know more about his dad, he didn't dare ask his mom. Anything regarding his dad made her sad, as he learned a long time ago. Naruto shook his head to get rid of such thoughts before looking at his home and couldn't help the smile that came over his face. Even though he has only been away for the time during his exams, it still felt like he had been gone for a long time. A small sigh escaped his lips as a feeling of relief washed over him. It was good to be home. Turning his attention to Percy, he said, well, this is it. Come on, let's go in. Percy nodded almost absent-mindedly as he continued to study the structure, before following Naruto inside. The moment they stepped in through the front door, both of them relaxed as they felt all the tiredness and tension leave their bodies. This house had an incredibly homey feel to it, instantly making even Percy feel at home. Looking up with a big smile on his face, Naruto called out, Grandma. I'm home. Taking the chance to look around, Percy noted that the interior was modest too, nothing too grand or luxurious. Although, it was incredibly clean with not even a speck of dirt anywhere. The air around the house was fresh, and everything was perfectly organized with not even the smallest thing out of place anywhere. But what caught Percy's attention the most was the rather large fireplace with a fire currently burning. It was strange, Percy thought. Despite being pretty big, the fire wasn't producing any smoke or even heat for that matter, just a subtle, soothing warmth that could be felt throughout the whole house. On the wall right above the fireplace was a large framed photo of a much younger Naruto. Probably about 6 or 7 years old, with a really beautiful woman hugging him from behind. Both of them were smiling brightly. Percy recognized the woman as Mrs. Namikaze, Naruto's mom. While he had never really met her, Percy had seen Mrs. Namikaze many times before, always on the school grounds though, when she would drop Naruto at school or pick him up, and on other rare times. He would see her conversing with Mr. Brunner. Noticing that Percy seemed to be studying something to their left, Naruto followed his line of sight to see that he was looking at their hearth. Naruto smiled. That fireplace was definitely his most favorite place in the world. And he knew it was true for his mom too, since for as far as he could remember in his young life she would always sit in front of that fireplace for hours while he napped on her lap. Thinking back on it now though, it had always appeared like she was contemplating something, and now he could guess what it was. She was most likely trying to talk to his dad but could never bring herself to actually say anything. He just knew that was it, and that the fire was connected to his dad somehow, as this fire has always burned. Never to extinguish. Naruto. Both Naruto and Percy were broken out of their thoughts by the melodious voice and turned to see an incredibly beautiful woman with long curly blonde CK hair and brilliant green eyes walking towards them from upstairs with a sweet smile on her face. For some reason, this woman's presence was so pleasant and comforting that it put Percy at total ease. And even his guard that was up at all times was suddenly let down completely as he relaxed. He wondered why, and who this woman was exactly. He didn't get to ponder on his thoughts any longer however, when Naruto spoke. Grandma. Naruto grinned broadly as the woman now identified as his grandmother approached him. Welcome home, Naruto. Naruto's grandmother hugged him, which he happily returned. While the grandmother and grandson caught up with each other, Percy was looking at the scene in bewilderment. Did Naruto just say, grandmother? What the hell? This woman didn't look anything like the grandmother of a 12-year-old would. But then again, Mrs. Namikaze didn't exactly look like the mother of a 12-year-old either. So he just shrugged and chalked it off as some weird family tea. Right, where everyone looks younger than they are. Besides, Percy has already learned to never question a woman's age. He shuddered as what had happened when he first came to Yancy Academy and had call Ed, his maths teacher, then an old hag, came back to him. He furiously shook his head to get rid of the horrible memory. Don't think about that, Percy. That was no woman. It was a demon straight out of nightmares. He had taken on many monsters in his life, but none were as scary as that demonic maths teacher. Truly a frightening creature, and ultimately a battle where Percy had faced utter defeat. And who might you be? Breaking out of his thoughts, Percy looked up, and two sets of identical green eyes met. Rhea, the titaness of motherhood, felt her eyes widen a small fraction as she stared at those green eyes that were strikingly similar to her own. Eyes that only one other person that she knew of possessed, besides her. Poseidon. Her eyes turned normal again however, as realization came to her. No, he is. Oh, that's right, Naruto exclaimed as he went and draped an arm over Percy's shoulder. Grandma, I want you to meet my best friend. Ah, Percy realized that he had been very rudely staring. Now normally, he wouldn't really care about manners, but for some reason he didn't want to show his bad side to this particular woman. Hello ma'am, I'm Percy Jackson, it's nice to meet you. Ah, he trailed off. Not knowing the woman's name. Percy inwardly cursed to himself. What was going on with him? He normally wasn't this big of an idiot. Meanwhile, Rhea just smiled sweetly at Percy before leaning forward and lightly patting him on the cheek. Just call me Grandma, dear. And it is very nice to meet you too, she said, giving a light laugh to herself, as if she was happy about something. Once more, Percy felt all of his tension, as well as all the useless thoughts leave him as he relaxed. Standing up straight again, Rhea spoke, now why don't the three of us go and get seated? I want you to tell me everything about the time you were away. It wasn't long afterwards that the three found themselves sitting on one of the couches while they talked about anything and everything. But mostly about their life at school. Well, it was Naruto who did most of the talking, with Percy participating at times while Rhea just listened with a smile and occasionally throwing her opinion here and there. Percy will silently admit that he was rather enjoying himself. Naruto's grandmother was really nice, and the snacks prepared by her were delicious. He supposed that this was where Mrs. Namikaze got her cooking skills from. Of course, he has tasted Mrs. Namikaze's food before, as Naruto always brought homemade lunches with him when he wasn't staying at the academy dorms as he claimed that his mom wanted for him to always eat healthy, and would share his food with Percy oftentimes. So he knew just how delicious Mrs. Namikaze's cooking was, and it seemed like Yuto's grandmother was just as good if not even better than her daughter. While Percy busied himself with the sandwiches, Naruto explained their vacation plan to his grandmother. "Oh, so you two are planning on going to Montauk for a few days before spending rest of the summer vacation here with me?" Ria said with a smile. She was happy that her grandsons wanted to spend their vacation with her. Quote, "So when do you want me to take you there?" Finishing the sandwich in his hand, Percy looked up at Ria and said, "Now, actually." Now, Ria and Naruto asked respectively as they turned to Percy. "Is that a problem?" Percy asked. "No, but," Ria began as she frowned slightly, "are you sure you don't want me to take you there tomorrow?" "Yeah, Percy," Naruto started, agreeing with his grandmother. "Can't we just go there tomorrow?" "I get what you mean but," Percy trailed off as he turned away from the two and looked down, before saying in a low tone, "I guess, I'm just a little homesick." And it was true indeed. With how restless and agitated he has been feeling for the past months, he really wanted to go home where he could be closer to the ocean, which always calmed him down. The other two were silent at the answer before Naruto spoke. "Well, if that is the case, then I guess we can go there now." Because hey, it wasn't like going there now was a problem or anything. Besides, Naruto will admit that he was really curious about Percy's home. Ria for her part however, frowned. While she would have much preferred it if her grandsons had stayed with her, she knew she had to agree. She wasn't allowed to get in the way of what a hero had decided. It not only was an ancient law of the gods, but was also decreed by the fates that a hero was to forge his own path, so she really had no choice but to agree. Besides, it was even more so for Naruto. Lord Minato had firmly stated that while he was to be aided when he needed help, Naruto was not to be restricted in any way. Ria sighed. "Fine," she agreed, before adding, "but I want you to go bathe and get changed first while I prepare lunch. I know you two just had a snack, but I am not willing to let you two go there on empty stomachs. So go freshen up and get changed. We will get going after lunch." Naruto and Percy looked at each other, before shrugging. They didn't exactly see a problem with that. "That's fine I guess," Percy said as Naruto nodded his head along in agreement. "Well, now that we have decided," Naruto said as he got up, before turning to Percy and adding, "Come on." Naruto motioned for Percy to follow him. The two then excused themselves as Naruto led Percy upstairs while they talked to each other on the way. Watching the two walk away had Ria thinking. Perhaps, this could actually work in her favor. Her sons were too far gone to listen to reason at this point, and unless someone resolved the matter, a war was inevitable. And perhaps Naruto and Percy were just the ones to do so before things got out of hand. She already knew they were capable of getting the job done. She has helped raise Naruto all his life, and was fully aware of the power he possessed, and the much greater power that still remained dormant deep within him. Besides, the fact that Naruto had the blood of a heavenly king flowing through his veins was more than enough to make him worth betting on. And with Percy, well, while this was the first time they were meeting face to face, she already knew of him, and what he was capable of from her son Poseidon. So as such, she knew that she could trust her grandsons to resolve the conflict between her sons. Plus, she did believe that it was time for them to go to the camp. Getting up from her sitting position, Ria started to make her way towards the kitchen. Now, what was the name of that young satyr who was charged with looking after her grandsons? Time skip. It was around later that evening when they made it to Montauk. Stepping out of the car once it pulled to a stop on the south shore. Way out at the tip of the Long Island, and taking one look around, Naruto instantly realized just why Percy seemed to love this place so much. Now while normally Naruto wasn't really the biggest fan of New York beaches, he found himself instantly liking this place. A small hill with green covering it overlooked the clear blue waters of the ocean that glistened and the light of the evening sun and the beautiful white sand of the beach that showed not a single sign of human taint or pollution. From what Percy had told Naruto on the way here, this place had a powerful mist surrounding it that deterred humans and monsters alike from approaching it, a mist that was maintained by both himself and his dad. Naruto did find it a bit odd as to why a god would keep away a place from human approach though. Just then Naruto felt a kick to his backside, causing him to stumble forward. Eyebrow twitching in irritation, Naruto turned his head to Percy sitting by the car entrance and looking back at him with a bored look, and hissed out, "What the hell? Just how long do you plan to stand there and gawk? Get a move on already," Percy said unfeelingly. "And you see, wouldn't have just said so instead of the kick," Naruto shot back, before he turned to face Percy with his eyebrow still twitching as a wide, mocking smile played on his lips before he added, "Oh, I'm sorry. I should have known that a brute like you wasn't capable of such thought process." Percy's eyebrow twitched as his bored expression soured up. Was Naruto challenging his intellect? "I don't want to hear that from a fishcake with nothing but a lump of charcoal for a brain," he shot with a mocking look of his own. "What boys?" Naruto and Percy turned to see Ria giving them a stern look. "Behave." Naruto and Percy looked back at each other and glared, though complied nonetheless. After the little escapade, the group of three proceeded to Percy's home. Well, although it could be called Percy's home, it was really just a wooden cabin situated on the hill overlooking the ocean that on the outside appeared to be quite old, but was surprisingly well kept. The inside on the other hand was surprisingly a lot better, and looked much more home-like, courtesy of Percy's dad, it would seem, with a single bedroom containing a double bed, a bathroom, a small kitchen, along with a couple of cupboards and bunks. There was sand everywhere, along with a few cobwebs here and there due to not being used in about half a year, but with the three of them, they cleaned the whole thing up fairly quickly before unpacking. "Well, now that we are done with the cleaning, and you two have settled, it is time for me to get going," Ria said as she along with her two grandsons now stood by the car. "Are you sure you can't stay here with us, Grandma?" Naruto asked with a frown, with Percy nodding along. He wouldn't mind the presence of Naruto's grandmother around. Ria smiled at her grandsons. Quote, "As much as I would love to stay with you two here, unfortunately I can't. But perhaps next time we can all come here, along with your mother," she said, giggling lightly at their disappointed looks. He then went and hugged Naruto before kissing him on the forehead. Pulling back, she did the same with Percy, who went as stiff as a block of ice at the unexpected gesture. Pulling away from the two, stepping over to the car before opening the door, Ria turned to her grandsons one last time, and smiled. "Now you two take care, all right," she bid, getting an appropriate response from Naruto while Percy remained silent. Before she entered the car and drove off. Left behind, Naruto and Percy stood there silently watching as the Range Rover disappeared into the distance. "Now that we are all alone, Percy," Naruto began once the car was completely out of sight, "fight me," he exclaimed as he pointed a finger at Percy with his other hand resting over his hip and a wide grin playing on his face. Percy stared blankly at Naruto before. I've fought many monsters before, but none of them were even remotely strong enough for me to go all out, and after a while they got boring to the point that dealing with them become a chore," Naruto added before he lowered his finger, and smirked. "But now I'm curious, just how well does another demigod measure up to me?" Percy stared at Naruto silently for a moment before he too smirked. "Let's take this somewhere else," Percy said as he turned to leave, but not before adding, "But don't mistake me for the same as a monster, otherwise, you won't even last long enough for it to be any fun." Naruto's smirk turned almost dangerous as he looked down at Percy tauntingly. "Oh, I'll admit that you aren't the same as some lowly monster, but it's you I am worried about lasting long enough for it to be fun." "We'll see about that," Percy said one last time before he started to leave, with Naruto following behind him. After a bit of walking, the T-Wo came to a stop on a beach some ways away from Percy's home. They stood apart from each other with neither saying a word, as the two continued to stand there silently while ignoring all but the one standing opposite of them and tensing. Something strange started to happen. It was as if the world itself started to become afraid as winds started to blow erratically, the sea began to crash onto the shore restlessly. The sky began to cover itself with dark clouds, and even the earth appeared to be trembling ever so slightly. Then all of a sudden, almost unconsciously, an immense level of pressure erupted from the two and engulfed everything around them. Though it was gone as soon as it came, everything went eerily silent after that, like the two had just told the world to settle down, without even realizing it themselves. It was all silent for a moment longer before their eyes narrowed at each other, and without any warning, the two shot at each other with blind speeds. Their fists met in a brilliant clash of fire and water, and fought for dominance, fire that evaporated the water rushing forth, and water that doused out the flames bursting forth. The two continued the struggle to overtake the other for a bit longer before their elements cancelled one another out, and the forces behind their blows dissipated. Wasting no time, Percy went for a kick that Naruto parried as he leapt away, and while still in mid-leap, he snapped his fingers at Percy's direction. A large inferno erupted following the snap that completely engulfed Percy and all around him. Landing on his feet, Naruto looked up to see Percy jumping out of the inferno and into the air with a layer of water surrounding his frame, before he also snapped his fingers. Water started to gather from the ocean and form into a huge cascade right above Percy, while also dousing out the inferno of flames below him, before with the swipe of his hand, the stream of water charged at Naruto. Something like this. Naruto stood unimpressed as his right hand caught on fire before he thrust it right into the incoming mass of water. Isn't going to work. A large pillar of flames erupted from his hand and completely consumed the cataract. As Naruto stood watching his flames die out and the steam beginning to rise, his eyes suddenly widened in alarm, and he looked to the side just in time to see a giant wave from the ocean about to crash onto him. He immediately called upon his flames, but it was too late as the wave crashed onto him and doused out the flames he had begun to conjure. Naruto soon found himself immobilized as the immense pressure from the wave pinned him on the ground below, and even the flames he tried to conjure were immediately put out by the water. The whole thing continued on for a bit long, before the wave receded back into the ocean. Coughing out the sea water, Naruto started to recover, but just as he was about to sit up, Percy was already upon him before punching him solidly in the gut. Naruto winced from the pain, and coughed out the remaining sea water. He slowly looked up at Percy with a smirk, and said, "Thanks. I needed that." Percy's eyes widened, and he immediately brushed up his forearm to block Naruto's punch. However, he could do nothing but blink when his arm snapped like a stick before Naruto's fist buried itself into his gut, and blasted him away. The force of the punch was such that Percy was sent crashing a long way into the ocean while splitting the waters in two in the process. Standing up, Naruto used his powers to dry himself up, before he stood facing the ocean while scratching the back of his head. "I wonder if I overdid it," he wondered out loud to himself, getting a little worried about Percy. Nah, he isn't the type to go down with just that. And that came to be true when Naruto perked up, and saw Percy calmly walking out of the ocean, not showing the slightest sign of even being injured. Naruto blinked. That was quick. Percy just smirked at Naruto. "Next time you send me crashing away, make sure it isn't into the ocean." Saying this, he raised his right arm and fisted it before adding, "But you didn't think that you were he only one who was holding back on his strength, did you?" Just as he said this, he shot at Naruto and went to punch him right in the face. Naruto, though, responded accordingly and caught the punch with his hand. However, his eyes widened when he felt his hand almost break and his bones shudder from the force behind the blow as a shockwave backlashed from them. Clenching his teeth, Naruto immediately threw a punch of his own. Percy leapt back and dodged Naruto's punch before swiping two finger in Naruto's direction. From right beside his head, a thick stream of pressurized water charged at Naruto, who immediately crossed his arms over his chest to block the direct hit. Gritting his teeth as he was still pushed back quite a bit, Naruto overheated the water, vaporizing it. He didn't get the chance to relax though, when he felt a kick connect to the side of his head and his world turn over. The force of the kick was enough to leave a giant crater on the sand, though Naruto did not let it faze him. Using his hands as support, he planted both of his feet right into Percy's face and blasted him away. Not staying down, Naruto and Percy immediately got back to their feet, and with wide grins on their faces, charged again at each other with their fists raised and going to punch the other in the face. At the same time, Naruto caught Percy's wrist in a vice grip, while Percy caught Naruto's fist with his hand. The two struggled for a bit, before rearing their heads back simultaneously and headbutting each other, their grins widening as they did so, with a shockwave blowing the air and sand around them from their concurrent blows. Breaking apart, the two immediately entered a fierce contest of exchanging blow after blow. Punch, kick, block, knee, parry, elbow, follow-up punch. While the two were too busy trying to reign supreme over the other, they failed to notice the effect their clashes were having on the world around them. With each blow they exchanged, the air pulsed and rippled with shockwaves. The sea grew more restless as it was pushed further and further back, the earth shuddered and, despite the sand, cracked under the pressure with crater upon crater decorating its surface. With each blow the dark clouds, no, the heavens themselves were further divided, but neither of them could be bothered with any of that, and focused solely on the opponent BEF. Or them with grins playing on their faces. The two continued on like that for quite a bit, before Percy caught both of Naruto's fists and kneed him solidly in the gut. Gritting his teeth, Naruto lost. No time in following up by raising his fist. "That hurts, damn it." He shouted out and punched Percy right over the head and sent him crashing into the ground. Naruto then immediately jumped high into the air, but instead of falling, simply floated there in midair and eyed Percy as he recovered. Swiping his index and middle fingers in front of him, a ring of fire surrounded Naruto. He then raised both of his now flaming arms and looked down at Percy. "I want you to try this for size," he exclaimed before bringing his arms down and unleashing an immense level of flames down towards the earth that charged at Percy in gigantic waves. Percy's eyes widened, before he too raised his arms and called upon the ocean, causing it to rise behind him. He then wasted no time in swiping both of his arms towards the incoming waves of flames. And the ocean charged and clashed with the sea of fire. The clash of fire and water continued on for a while before both Naruto and Percy were forced to stop to the entire area getting surrounded in steam to the point that it completely obscured their surroundings. Naruto, as he stood there in midair, looked around him in search for Percy with no luck before suddenly his eyes widened in alarm and looked behind him to see that the son of Poseidon had appeared right above him with his fist raised. Wasting no time, Naruto spun around and planted his elbow in Percy's face right as he came down at him, and at the exact moment Percy planted his fist in his face. The two of them simultaneously sent each other crashing into the cloud of steam, and onto the ground. It was only a moment later that a shockwave on an entirely different level than the previous ones erupted and completely blew away the cloud of steam, while also kicking up the sand and pushing back the ocean. When the shockwave finally died down with the ocean returning to its previous spot, and the sand settling down, did it give a clear view of things. There stood Naruto and Y at the center where the shockwave had erupted with their fists planted right into each other's faces. It was silent for a moment before both of them unceremoniously fell to the ground. It was a double KO. As the two lay there on the ground panting, they suddenly started to laugh out of nowhere. At that moment, they didn't know what was going on anymore, nor why did they feel like it, and they didn't care, they just laughed. And laughed. Afterwards, when they made it back to Percy's home, they got changed and spent the rest of the evening swimming into the ocean, where they ended up trying to wrestle the other down into the water. Though, Percy won here as they were in the ocean, till the sun had started to set, and they had gotten a bit hungry. So after they ate the snacks left behind for them by Rhea, Naruto started a campfire and the two sat around it roasting marshmallows. It did not come as a surprise to Percy to see Naruto being really good at roasting them. After all, no matter how much he may not look like it, Naruto was a surprisingly great cook. Something he must have picked up from his mother and grandmother, Percy supposed. "You know, if we hadn't been close to the ocean, I would have totally owned your ass back there," Naruto commented in a matter-of-factly tone as he bit into a perfectly roasted marshmallow. "Yeah right," Percy scoffed. "If anything, I was going easy on you since if you remember I did not use Riptide in that fight, or else, I would have owned your ass," he stated, patting his pocket where Riptide in its pen form rested in. Naruto humped at that. "You won't get to hold that against me for long. Just you wait, I'll get a badass sword of my own, and then I'll wipe your ass along with that precious Riptide of yours." Percy couldn't help but feel smug as he watched Naruto grumble to himself about how unfair it was that he didn't get a badass sword from his own dad, before he said in a similarly smug tone, Good luck with that, but here is no sword more badass than Riptide. Naruto grumbled even more at that, before he decided to change the subject and ask something that had been on his mind. Say, Percy. Percy looked away from the marshmallow he was roasting and at Naruto curiously. You live alone? Naruto asked as Percy had never really said anything about living alone. Thinking back on it though, Perch had never talked about his family other than his dad. But Naruto had always thought that he at least lived with his mom. Percy stared at him silently. Oh right, I haven't taken you there yet. Naruto blinked in confusion at that. Taken him where? Percy took the marshmallow from the stick and put it in his mouth, before throwing the stick in the flames. You were also wondering why my dad kept this place away from human-monster approach. Weren't you? He asked, getting a nod from Naruto, before he stood up, shoved his hands in his pockets, and turned to leave as he motioned for Naruto to follow him. Come on, I'll take you to where my mom is. He stared at Percy's retreating back curiously before he also threw the stick in his hand into the flames and stood up to follow his friend. Naruto had been wondering just where Percy would take him to, but he was honestly surprised when he noticed that Percy was leading him back towards the house, or rather the side of the house that was right by the tip of the hill. He glanced at Percy, who was walking a few steps ahead of him, a bit confused, before he took notice of Percy walking by the side of the house and over to top of the hill, coming to a stop just a few meters away from the tip. Well, this is it. Just as Naruto came to a stop right beside Percy, his eyes widened. Percy, this is, he could do nothing but stare in shocked disbelief at the sight that greeted him. A grave. Yeah, I know, and that was exactly what it was, a grave with two thick woods tied together to form a cross with the name, Sally Jackson, written on it. Silence. That was all that existed between them as Naruto and Percy sat cross-legged right beside each other on the top of the hill and stared into the ocean. Neither uttering even the smallest of sounds. Both were lost too deep in their own thoughts to even consider the use of words. However, they both knew that there was no need for words. They continued to just sit there, enjoying the feeling of the calming sea breeze caressing their forms, and listening to the gentle sound of ocean waves crashing onto the shore. The atmosphere around them was peaceful and comfortable, until it was broken by the sound of rapid footsteps, followed by sharp gasps. Broken out of their thoughts, they turned behind them and blinked when they saw Grover standing there without his crutches and pants. Grover took deep breaths to calm himself, and all but glared at his two friends sitting there and staring stupidly at his legs. What the hell were you two thinking? He asked, and whatever he might have been expecting, the response he got was not one of them. The two blinked, before saying at the exact same time, Dude, you're half donkey. Grover let out a sharp, throaty, blah ha ha, before he cried out, Goat. I'm half goat, but that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you two had to do something stupid like that. Honestly, I spent the whole day searching for you two. What the hell were you thinking? Naruto and Percy calmly stood up, before simultaneously pointing a finger at one another and crying out, it was all his idea. Realizing what the other said, they then suddenly turned to each other and glared before once more crying out, What you do mean it was my idea? It was all you who said we should ditch Grover. While two bashed their foreheads together and started to bicker about whose idea it was to leave him behind, Grover himself stood there silently studying his friends. Something between Naruto and Percy had changed. He didn't know what it was, but he noticed it clearly. Things between them weren't the same as they were earlier that day. Just then, a loud thunderclap resounded before a massive bolt of lightning struck the sea, effectively putting a stop to Naruto and Percy's bickering. Turning towards the sea where the bolt had struck, their eyes widened, finally noticing the dark thunder clouds covering the sky, cracking with thunder and lightning. The winds then too started to blow faster and harder as rain started to fall, and the sea started to become angry following the lightning strike. The three stood there, watching as the weather rapidly started to get worse. Before they came to the same conclusion, they couldn't stay there anymore, or this place won't survive till the morning, along with them. You two are fast runners, aren't you? Grover asked without taking his eyes away from the freak weather. Yep, we are really fast runners. Naruto, Percy, and Grover tore through the night like ninjas on an emergency retreat after a failed assassination. The rain fell cold and the wind harsh against their forms as they ran along the road at full force, and away from their pursuer. Naruto looked at Grover in the lead to see him gritting his teeth and running as fast as he could. It worried him to see his friend pushing himself to get the two of them to safety, despite how scared and nervous he was. Thunder cracked and lightning flashed above them, and his ears caught a distinctive bellow in the distance. It really was hard to tell what was after them, or how far it was in this darkness and rain. So, he started, mind sharing just where we are going. Quote, Grover didn't turn towards him. The summer address I told you about. He looked at Percy, thinking back to their talk before Grover had arrived. The place your dad wanted you to go to. The only safe place for demigods. Yeah, though I never really wanted to go there before now. Percy spoke in a tight voice. Grover casted a nervous glance at the son of Poseidon. Mr. D isn't exactly happy about that, you know. Your father has been putting a lot of pressure on us to bring you to the camp, but you always gave us the slip. Percy remained silent at that. Naruto was curious about this Mr. D but instead decided to ask, so then why did you suddenly decide to go there now? A dark look crossed his black-haired friend's face. It's not safe anymore, not only for me, but for you two as well. Quote, and not safe from what exactly? Even though he said that, he did have a gut feeling about the whole thing. Oh, nobody much, Grover began in a small, strained D voice that was barely audible over the howling winds, just the Lord of the Dead and some of his bloodthirstiest minions. What? Naruto blinked at the rather blunt response, then shook his head. Then wouldn't it be better to just fly? That would be fast. What? No. Grover snapped so sharply, it was as if he had just been suggested a revisit to the fates themselves. Yeah, we really should keep away from flying. Percy agreed and mumbled under his breath about being able to do without getting crushed, fried, and spat out of the sky. Grover suddenly turned to Percy at that. You can fly. There was a look of disbelief at the nod he got in response, but you are the son of the Lord of the Sea, you shouldn't be able to fly. I don't know about shouldn't, but I can. They took a left there and ran along a narrower road running past darkened farmhouses and wooded hills. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, and instantly shut it close when his instincts started tingling madly and he, along with Percy, tackled Grover forward mere moments before a bolt of lightning blasted the spot they had been on. While they avoided a direct hit, it still sent crashing into the trees. Naruto groaned as he recovered and sat upright, mumbling, right, it's a bad idea to fly when the Lord of the Sky is pissed. He turned to look at his friends to see them gathering themselves as well. It was a good thing that they had reacted when they had, or they would not have come out with just these scratches. It was then that a deep, rumbling growl caught his attention, his two friends also turning towards the source. They saw the silhouette of a huge figure lumbering towards them on the shoulder of the road. As he got closer, there was another flash of lightning, allowing them to get a better view of the monster. A big, fuzzy bull head with two pointed horns was attached to a huge bulky body with coarse brown hair starting at about his belly button that got thicker as it reached his shoulders, two large arms bulging with muscles and meaty hands swinging by his sides. He wore no clothes except for, as Percy would put it, a bright white fruit of the looms. Grover let out a terrified bleat. The half-man, half-bull was rather easy to recognize. From his sitting position, Naruto started, that's the Min. Don't call out his name. Percy cut in, names have power. Let's just call him Beefcake. What, Beefcake? He was ignored. Percy stepped forward and took out his cheap-looking ballpoint pen. He casually took the cap off, and it started transforming. In half a second, Percy held a shimmering medium-length bronze sword with a double-edged blade, a leather-wrapped grip and a flat hilt riveted with gold studs. While it was his first time seeing it, Naruto knew it was Percy's beloved sword, Riptide. Let's get this done with, said the son of the sea god as he started towards the bull man, closing in on them slowly and deliberately with every intention of ending it with the first strike. So much for trying to get away without a confrontation, he thought. Wait, Percy, Naruto called out, jumping to his feet. Let me handle it. Percy stopped and looked at the blonde as he walked by and towards the Minotaur. He made his way over to the monster that was snuffing and nuzzling, trying to pick up their scents with a determined face. And was soon face to face with him. Nah. Naruto looked up at the monster with a smirk. Hey, you, become my pet, he exclaimed, leaving his friends dumbfounded. Not paying them any attention though, he continued, you're beefcake, and I'm fishcake. We're meant to be. Percy deadpanned. What is this? Some sort of messed up love confession, he commented, but was yet still ignored. Then again, it was Naruto and he did have his rather eccentric, impulsive tendencies. And admittedly, said fishcake was not very good with words. Naruto waited patiently. Beefcake tilted his head to the side, took one sniff, and punched Naruto straight across the face. His head was sent snapping to the side with a loud crack. The fishcake was silent for a bit, then snapped his neck back in place, cracked it a few times, and spat out the blood and a couple of teeth. The remaining blood in his mouth lighting up in flames and healing the damage, his teeth regenerating. He looked back up again and simply said, I will take that as a no. In the next moment, the responding punch he dealt had his arm nearly entirely buried into Beefcake's abdomen. The sound of bones breaking and flesh tearing was in the air before Naruto withdrew his fist and the Minotaur fell to his knees. Groaning pitifully in pain, Naruto turned and went back to his friends with a disappointed pout. Let's just get going. It was then that Beefcake started to try struggling to his feet with a pained and angry growl. Percy sighed with Riptide resting on his shoulder. He then made his way over to the downed monster. Don't just leave him to wander around the camp border, he said, and in a swift strike, cleaved the Minotaur in two. The two halves then crumbled to sand and were carried away in chunks by the wind, and the only thing left behind was a single horn. He picked the horn up, stuffed it in his bag, and made his way back to his friends. Spoil of war, he said to Naruto's questioning look. Anyways, were you serious about wanting him as a pet? He asked, not knowing just what to make of it. Naruto shrugged. I was thinking he could be something like a stand. You know, to summon and fight along with me. Now normally, I would have liked giant toad monsters since there aren't any, and you called him Beefcake, I thought he would do. Percy raised an interested eyebrow but did not comment. There was probably more to it. Although, he did find it rather offending that Naruto would dare compare a monster to a stand. So how much further G-Man? Grover, who had been staring at them in silent wonderment, seemed to snap out of it. Huh. Oh, right, see that pine tree? He pointed towards what appeared to be the shadow of a huge tree at the crest of the nearest hill. That's the property line. It's just over that hill and down the valley. There was another flash of lightning and they saw what he meant. Percy touched Riptide at the tip with the cap and it shrunk back to its pen form. He put it back in his pocket and followed his friends as they did their way over to the said pine tree and looked down to see the illuminated lights of the farmhouse situated at the heart of the valley. They took to walking down the path before them, and after not too long, came upon a large stone structure of a gate with the words Camp Half-Blood written on top. There also appeared to be a figure riding a horse waiting for them. When they reached the gate, Naruto's face lit up at seeing the familiar face of their Latin teacher standing there under the dim lighting. Mr. Brew, he trailed off when he saw that the said Latin teacher was not riding a horse like he first thought, but rather had his upper body grafted to the body of a huge white stallion from the trunk. Ner. Brunner let a good-natured smile play on his face, but had the same mischievous glint in his eyes like when he would pull a pop quiz in class with all the choice answers be. Ah, good, Percy, Naruto. Grover, he said, leaving Naruto's unasked question unanswered, you made it. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. Naruto along with Percy and Grover followed Brunner along the path that led towards a large, sky-blue house with white trims. He kept glancing at Brunner like he wanted to say something but was stopping himself. Finally, the centaur caught his gaze and asked, is there something you would like to ask, Naruto? He did not let the opportunity slip and asked without missing a beat, who exactly are you, Mr. Brunner? Who am I? He seemed to repeat to himself, before smiling down at Naruto. You may know me as Chiron. Naruto perked up with a surprised look, and even Percy looked up curiously. Are you saying that you are the Chiron? His smile widened at the looks the two were giving him. The Chiron from the stories. The trainer of heroes and all that. Yes, I am that Chiron. But shouldn't you be dead? Asked Percy. Yeah, weren't you shot with a poisonous arrow by Hercules, was it? Naruto put it. Chiron looked ahead and paused, as if the question intrigued him. I honestly don't know if I should be dead. He spoke, ignoring what Naruto had said. The truth is, I can't be dead. You see, eons ago the gods granted my wish. I could continue the work I loved. I could be a teacher of heroes as long as humanity needed me. I gained much from that wish, and I gave up much. But I am still here, so I can only assume I am still needed. Doesn't it ever get boring? Percy asked. It sure wouldn't be something that he would be able to do. Teaching brats with ADHD and dyslexia for 3,000 years. Forget it. No, Chiron answered, horribly depressing, at times, but never boring. Naruto could not help asking, why depressing? Chiron masterfully brushed aside the question once more and said, oh, would you look at that? We have made it to our destination. They turned their attention ahead to find that they had indeed made it to the big, baby blue farmhouse. They then further followed Chiron as he led them down at the end of the porch wrapped all around the house. Over to the only two occupants. One was sitting on a chair at the pinnacle table while the other stood leaning against the wall. Ah, Chiron, and I see that you brought Stray and the spoiled brats along with you, said the one sitting at the table. He was a small but porky middle-aged man with a red nose, big watery eyes and curly hair so black it was almost purple. The man wore a tiger-printed Hawaiian shirt and held a can of Diet Coke in his hand. And he really did not look happy to see the two of them. Naruto was about to show the guy just how happy they themselves were at the meeting when Grover stopped him and murmured to him and Percy, that's Mr. D. He's the camp director. Be polite. He then pointed to the guy leaning against the wall. The other man over there is Argus. He is the chief security guard at the camp. The guy, Argus, was a husky blonde dude like a surfer. He had blue eyes, and a lot of them, like on his cheeks, forehead, and the back of his hands etc. Naruto wondered if he was the real Argus. He caught a glance at Chiron. On second thought, he most likely was. He looked back at the hundred-eyed security guard to see him looking back at him and Percy welcomingly. It was so unlike the sour look Mr. D had given them that Naruto just had to give him a wave. He was happy that at least one of them did not look like they had just murdered his puppy. Argus' eyes seemed to twinkle at that, and he waved back. His attention was once more brought back to Mr. D, whose eyes had zeroed in on Percy and he all but glared. You have been giving us a lot of trouble, Perseus Jackson, was all he said before turning his gaze to Naruto. He did not look any less displeased. And you, Naruto Namikaze, what bid you to get involved in this silly demigod business? I doubt your mother will be very happy to find you here. Dionysus, Chiron abruptly cut in, maybe you should welcome our new campers. That sparked a bit of a stare down between the two. Mr. D broke his gaze and grumbled under his breath, apparently giving up the point. He then looked back at Naruto and Percy in irritation before giving a very much practiced speech. Fine, if I must. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. There. Now don't expect me to be glad to see you. Now normally, Naruto would have all too eagerly responded just how much they shared the sentiment, but now he found himself much more curious about Mr. D's reaction to him. He caught Percy's eyes and the two conveyed the same message. Why did the god of wine speak of him like he was not a demigod? Chiron turned to the two and smiled. I am afraid that you have come after curfew so there won't be any dinner. Naruto turned to the centaur. That's all right. We've had dinner. Well, more like wolfing down everything, which was a lot. His grandmother had prepared for them. Dinner was not an issue. That is a relief. The trainer of heroes said, now normally we would have a lot more to discuss. But since it is past curfew and you just made it here, we will put that off for a later date. Let us first get down to your placements. He turned to Percy and spoke. You, Percy, are already claimed by your father, Poseidon. So it's cabin 3 for you. Percy nodded. He already knew about his father's cabin, and how it was reserved for him. Naruto on the other hand, Chiron turned to him, as a bit of a problem. He has yet to be claimed by his godly parents, so we will have to place him in cabin 11 for now. He can sleep in the big house for the night. He then turned to the camp director. Is that all right, Mr. D? Mr. D simply waved him off with a, yes, yes. Naruto felt like pouting, but then Percy spoke. That won't be necessary, he said. Naruto can stay at cabin 3 along with me. He doesn't have to go to cabin 11 or sleep at the big house. Mr. D snorted. That's not how it works, boy. Chiron smiled calmly. I am afraid we cannot have that, Percy. And why not? Percy asked with narrowed eyes. He was not liking this one bit, the camp director even less. Aside from cabin 11, Hermes, who accepts the undetermined demigods, you will need special permission from the other gods to stay at their cabins. Or they will not be pleased. I'm sure my dad won't mind. Percy spoke firmly. You won't mind, right, Dad? He prayed to his father, and like always, the answer sure did come. Listen, boy, even if you... A sudden green glow caught their attention. They turned to see a light green trident hovering above Naruto's head. When they all had their eyes on it, the trident morphed into a bright green checkmark. It was as if the sea god had just said, sure, go ahead. Percy turned to Mr. D, feeling a little smug despite himself. That does qualify as special permission, doesn't it? Chiron too turned to the camp director. Mr. D, the wine god though, simply shrugged. Well, if old Barnacle Beard is fine with it. Chiron once more turned to Naruto, who was standing there the way he always did when the teachers discussed his report cards with his mother, and spoke, well, since you have the permission of the Lord of the Sea, you will be placing with Percy in cabin 3. He then added, until you are claimed, that is. Naruto nodded, pushing the disappointment that he was not claimed by his own dad aside. For now, he was at least glad that he would be staying with Percy. I'm tired, Mr. D said and rose to his feet. I believe I will be going to sleep. But first, Grover, he turned to the satyr, we will talk about assessing your performance on this assignment tomorrow. For now, go and get some rest. Why yes, sir, he spoke meekly. Naruto was curious about the way he always cringed when it came to Mr. D, but considering it was Dionysus, he figured it was a natural satyr reaction. He was still concerned though. Mr. D then turned towards Percy. Cabin 3, Percy Jackson. And mind your manners. He faced Naruto next. And you, Naruto Namikaze, if you have your father's blood in your veins, then you would know better than to get involved, much less take sides. He warned, casting a glance at the son of the sea god as he did so. And cabin 3, he added and swept into the farmhouse. Argus nodded to them, before he followed the god inside. Grover turned to the two and smiled nervously. See you guys tomorrow, he said and went about his way with his shoulders slumped in worry. See ya, G-man. Naruto and Percy watched him go in worry. They could tell that something had him dreading meeting Mr. D again. Tomorrow, will he be okay? Chiron smiled at their concern for the satyr. Grover his big dreams, and tomorrow's assessment will have a deciding impact on his career path. Although, he should be fine. This time did not turn out like the last. Naruto looked at him questioningly. This time, quote, Chiron started to move, beckoning them to follow. Come, let me show you to your assigned cabin. Naruto and Percy exchanged looks. They were starting to see a pattern. On another thought, it would seem that despite his attitude, Mr. D held the word in this camp. The little meeting had ended rather quickly after his dismissal. They shrugged in unison, though, and followed after Chiron as he led them towards the cabins. They walked by the huge forest that took up at least a quarter of the valley, choosing to ignore the strange and creepy sounds coming off from with the woods. Monsters, maybe. The woods are stocked, if you ever care to try yourselves, but do go armed, said Chiron. Stocked with what? You'll see. Capture the flag as Friday night. Percy already has his weapon. As for you, Naruto, he looked at the blonde and thought, I am afraid someone else has yours. So we will have to find you something before then. That caught their attention. Naruto was about to ask more but didn't get the chance. Ah, we have arrived. They had made it to the cabins. The entire area was lit with lights, giving them a visible view of them. There were 12 of them in total, nestled in the woods by the lake. They were arranged in a U, with 2 at the base and 5 in a row on each side. And they were without a doubt the most bizarre collection of buildings they had ever seen. Some of the cabins seemed to be buzzing with life, particularly number 11, some were quiet but had the lights on, while others were dark and quiet. And of them did not show any sign of living. They were number 1, 2, 3, and 8. Chiron led them to the first cabin on the left, cabin 3. Poseidon's cabin. The place they will be staying at. It wasn't high and mighty like cabin 1, but long and low and solid. The outer walls were of rough gray stone studded with pieces of seashell and coral. Lights flared to life the moment Percy stepped through the door, giving an abalone glow to the interior walls. Naruto followed after Percy, and couldn't help but find himself impressed. Despite giving no sign that anyone had lived there in years, it still gave off a calm and serene feel, like the tranquil floor of the ocean. There were 6 bunks in total, with sand-white silk sheets turned down, placed in order by the walls in rows of 3. Well then, I will leave the 2 of you to get settled, Chiron said, catching their attention. They turned to the centaur to see him standing outside by the front, the door too low for him to come inside. I will send Grover to fetch the 2 of you tomorrow morning. He spoke. We will give you your tour of the camp then. For now, you 2 should get some rest. Saying this, Chiron turned to start walking away, but not before adding, and remember not to wander outside past curfew. Naruto and Percy watched their former Latin teacher gallop away, before turning to each other and wordlessly claiming a bed. Percy taking the one in the middle and Naruto the one beside his, by the wall opposite to the front. They put their bags away and crashed onto their respective bunks, neither saying a word. It had been a long and exhausting day even for the 2 of them. And yet, instead of feeling tired, they felt wide awake and brimming with energy. A lot had happened this past day, and the 2 found their minds rushed over everything. They had come to learn a lot, and have come to question a lot of things they thought they knew. For what it was worth though, they did come to learn one definite thing, a lot more was happening than what they had first thought. After a while of silence, Naruto spoke. So, quite the day, huh, Percy? Yeah, began the son of the sea god almost absent-mindedly before turning to his friend. Isn't there something that you would like to share? Naruto resisted the urge to roll his eyes and met bright green with his own, equally bright blue. I could say the same. Isn't there something that you would like to share? I mean, there has to be a reason a god would warn me against getting involved with you. Percy sighed. I only wish I could share the reason with you, but well, I'm just as lost as you are. His eyes then narrowed at a certain thought. What did the god of wine mean by taking sides? Or rather, taking his side. Something much bigger is going on, isn't there, Percy? Yeah, something a lot bigger is going on, Percy agreed, meeting Naruto's eyes. Something that involves my dad, and something that the gods don't want to involve your dad in. Naruto's eyes widened a bit, and a thought nagged him at the back of his head, without revealing itself. He pushed it aside though, and spoke, but it does involve you, right? Percy was silent for a moment, before saying, that it does. And for whatever reasons, they don't seem particularly serious about killing me. Naruto gave his friend an almost incredulous look. Not serious in killing you. It sounds strange, but that's how it looks. Sending one monster at a time. Those half-assed attempts at smiting me. They should know by now that I would never die with just those. He paused here. It almost looks like they want something from me. Naruto suddenly perked up. Now that you mentioned it, didn't Mrs. Dodds say something about a theft? That's right. Percy gave an irritated sigh here, and haven't you been having these dreams about the gods fighting over something like little kids over a toy? Give it back, give it back. They go. Naruto had to stop himself from laughing at that as he commented in an amused tone. And they think you have it. Percy's eyebrow gave a twitch as he gave the blonde a sour look. It's not funny. Sorry, Naruto said. He too would think it was not funny. If the all-powerful gods were after him over something that he did not have. But do you have any idea what it is that they are fighting over? I've got no clue. And what do you plan on doing from here on? I don't know, Percy replied, Help my dad out in any way I can, I guess. They were silent after that. Before Naruto spoke, well, whatever you decide to do, you can count on me to help you throughout it all. Percy looked at Naruto with a raised eyebrow, even though the gods won't like it. Naruto grinned at his friend. I don't care about that. Even if the gods won't like it, or even if my mom won't be happy. I am still going to take your side. Percy smiled at his blonde best friend, a strange feeling taking a hold of him. It would seem that for the first time ever, he will not have to fight alone. There was not much to be said after that, and despite both not feeling it, sleep grabbed a hold of them abruptly, bringing along with it something ominous. Dream. For demigods, dreams were as frequent an occurrence as sleep was. That is to say, sleep was almost always accompanied by some sort of precognitive dreams. So naturally, both Naruto and Percy were no stranger to demigod dreams. That night, after sleep came out of nowhere, they found themselves in yet another dream. And admittedly, their most bizarre and creepy dream ever. Naruto and Percy found themselves standing side by side in what appeared to be, for the lack of a better word, a dark world. Night appeared to have fallen with a pitch-black sky covered in more stars than they would ever see. But what really drew their attention were what appeared to be a black sun and a blood-red moon. The earth below their feet was dry and moist, sandy and rocky at the same time. As if it had been scorched, flooded, and then raised at the same time. There was also this black cloud of dust laying thick on the surroundings, like blood that had dried and turned to dust carried by the wind. And then there was the creepiest thing of all. Far away from them, a gigantic beast, much bigger than even the mountains, was giving out a strangled cry. It looked human-like with a human head and torso, although it only had a single eye shut closed tight, a single ear, and single mouth with a number of horns decorating its crown. It had 2 large and muscular arms, and 10 towering tails with human hands for tips. And sprouting from its back was a huge tree, with an equally huge flower blooming on top, that was extending towards the moon. Naruto and Percy instinctively took a step back at the sight, and turned to one another. Unable to do anything more. What happened next was chaotically sudden. A thundering boom shocked the very world, and large bolts of lightning fell from the heavens and blasted the earth. Giant wave upon wave of water swallowed everything in their path. Razor-sharp torrents of winds tore apart the very mountains. Spheres of flames dropped like a number of small suns. Chunks of the size of cities came crashing down like oversized pellets of hail. In the blink of an eye, utter chaos and destruction had claimed the world, and Naruto and Percy, though unharmed by it all, found themselves horrified at the sight. It was like watching the calamitic end of the world, and they were powerless to do anything but watch as it all fell apart. It was then that 4 shadows fell over the 2 of them. And try as they might, they just could not turn towards the source. Then in a language that neither knew but for some reason understood, a deep voice said mournfully. So, in the end they just could not forgive one another. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.